Hey YouTube, this is Trains and Destinations, and in today's video we're going to be doing a quick phone unboxing. And so without further ado, I present to you this Motorola phone, the Moto G Stylus. So if you want some information about the Moto G Stylus, this phone is essentially the Moto G8 in other countries, but here in North America, at least for this time around, Motorola decided to get rid of the numbers when it comes to their Moto phones, their Moto G phones. And so essentially this is the Moto G8, but for the North American market you have the Moto G Fast, then the Moto G Power, and then this, the Moto G Stylus. Now the Stylus is the top of the line model. In terms of normal pricing, the Fast is $200, the Power is $250, and then this phone, the Stylus, is $300. Now, I got this phone on sale for $200, so it was on sale for $100 off. Motorola ran a sale during Halloween, then they ran an early November sale. That's when I picked this up. It might go on sale again around Black Friday. I'm not sure. I would check Motorola's website for details, but again, I got this phone for $100 off. So essentially, I got this phone for I got this phone for 2/3 of the price, which I think is an excellent deal. And I think for $200, this is basically the best $200 phone you can buy, at least on paper. I haven't opened it up yet. I haven't tried it out, but based on the specs, I think that this phone is going to be fantastic for the price especially. So anyway, let's go over the box. The box is pretty basic. So you got your little glowing Motorola symbol there, but other than that, it's just a all black box. This tells you what's included, which you get the stylus, a charger, cable, guides, and a SIM tool. And then the bottom, of course, has your SIM and IMEI information, so we don't want to look at that. Now, in terms of what's the differences, or what's the difference between the three models, so the Fast is the cheapest, but it also is the lowest specs. So that has only 3 gigs of RAM and 32 gigs of storage. Then if you step up to the Power, you get 4 gigs of RAM and 64 gigs of storage. And then if you step up to the Stylus, you get the same 4 gigs of RAM, but you get a whopping 128 gigabytes of storage, which by 2020 standards, that's a flagship level of storage. That's a flagship amount of storage. Most flagship phones today come with 128 gigs of storage. Some do have 256, and the most high-end phones have 512, but still, for most flagships, 128 gigs of storage is essentially, something that pretty much every flagship phone comes with. So the fact that this phone, again, $200 phone when it's on sale, $300, even at $300, 120 gigs of storage is fantastic. It's incredible you get this much storage for such a low price. Now, it's not the fastest storage in the world, but again, 120 gigs of storage, especially on sale for $200, it's a no-brainer. I think this phone, at least on paper, is a very good deal. Now, going on further in terms of other differences between the phones, when it comes to battery, this phone has a 4,000 mAh battery. The Moto G Fast also has a 4,000 mAh battery, but if you get the Power, that has a larger 5,000 mAh battery. So if you want the maximum battery life, the Power would be better, but I think that the Stylus is better than the Power because the Power only has 64 gigs of storage. So I think having double the storage is more important, at least to me. Having double the storage is more important than having the biggest battery possible. But of course, for your individual case scenario, that might be different in terms of what your priorities are. One interesting thing, though, is that all these phones use the same exact processor, in which that was the case with the Moto G7. No matter if you got the G7 Play, the Power, or the Moto G7, you got the same processor, and that's the case here too. So this phone has the Snapdragon 665 processor. It's an octa-core chip, and in terms of the power, it's pretty close to the Snapdragon 670 that was in the Google Pixel 3a, but it's just below that. It's just below the Snapdragon 670, so it's a decent mid-range chip. For normal operations, it should be fine. For gaming, you're going to have to turn down settings, but I think it'll be capable. I've heard battery life is really good because this is a power-efficient chip. Of course, that combined with this big battery. Now, in terms of other things that are similar, that would be the screen. So all three Moto Gs have 6.4-inch LCD displays. The only difference is that the Power and the Stylus have 1080p displays, whereas the Fast has only a 720p display. So the fastest 720p, the other two are 1080p. So again, just to recap, this has a 6.4-inch 1080p IPS display. It's an LCD, so it's not OLED, but that's fine. 4 gigs of RAM, 128 gigs of storage. So the specs of this thing are just really good for the price. And then the other difference are the cameras. So I believe these phones, all three Moto Gs do have triple cameras. You have a standard camera, you have an ultra wide, and then I believe it's a macro camera. However, while the main sensors on the fast and the power are 16 megapixels, this has a 48 megapixel camera. Now, obviously, you're not gonna see flagship level performance from this camera, but again, at least on paper, the fact that you're getting a 48 megapixel camera in a phone that can cost as low as $200, I just think that's really impressive. Now, that doesn't mean things are perfect though, and I'll show you why in a sec. So anyway, let's take out the phone. As you can see, it's all wrapped up. And then we got here this little flap. Let's lift up the flap here. And inside the flap, we get some paperwork. So we got our Moto G Stylus there. And then behind that booklet, we get our SIM tool, which this is the same. This is the same SIM tool that Motorola's been using for a couple of years. And then your safety guides. So not much there, but again, pretty classy. It all comes in a little flap. And then other than that, all you have is the charger. Now, this is one area of cost cutting, unfortunately. And what I mean by that is that this here is a 10-watt rapid charger. So the Moto G, as far as I know, the Moto G5, the Moto G6, and the G7 all came with 15-watt fast charging. With the new Moto Gs, you only get a 10-watt rapid charger. So that's definitely an area of cost cutting. And it also means that if you have, say, the power, it means that it's going to take a long time to charge that 5,000 milliamp hour battery. So I think that's a bit disappointing, to be honest. I mean, it is. It's definitely a bit of cost cutting, but will this charger get the job done? You know, I would say so. And yeah, I would say so. And for comparison, my Moto G7 Play, which I have right here. So this here is my Moto G7 Play. I currently own this G7 Play as well as a Pixel 3a, but this G7 Play has the same exact charger as this. It's the same charger, so it's a 10-watt charger. It'll get the job done, but you know, I do think that it's a little bit much that Motorola decided to get rid of their turbocharger that they have been using the last 3 years. So that's one area of cost cutting, but again, it's not a deal breaker, but that's something that I should point out. So let's go ahead and take a look at the phone itself. So this phone, which I can only really show horizontally. So again, this is a pretty big phone, but it's not too heavy. And of course, this is called the stylus because this phone does have a built-in stylus. Now, from what I've read on paper, this is not the best stylus in the world. This phone is going to be a lot closer to an LG Stylo than a Samsung Galaxy Note. But, you know, it's pretty cool. I'm probably not going to use the stylus on this phone, but, you know, it's just a nice extra feature to have. In terms of the mechanism, it's pretty good, I would say. Pen comes out nice and easy, and when you do have the pen in, it stays in there pretty tightly. And it's essentially designed here on the corner, so, you know, there's really no way you can put this pen in the wrong way. And I would say that if you're going to compare this to a stylo, this is way better than an LG Stylo, at least in my opinion. You know, but obviously this is nowhere near a Galaxy Note. And so at least for me, I bought this phone because it was $200 on sale and it had 128 gigs of storage. And the rest of the specs were decent. But at least for me, the stylus wasn't a big deal. And because of the stylus, this phone does have a smaller battery than the Power. So again, this has a 4,000 mAh battery. The Power has a 5,000 mAh battery. So if storage is of no concern to you, then maybe you would want to get the Power because you are getting the bigger battery, unless you care about the stylus. So, you know, it's interesting, and I do like the Motorola is giving you some options here. So let's go ahead and take off the wrapping here. There we go. And if you look at the back here, this is a very interesting color. So I believe this color is called Mystic Indigo. So this is Mystic Indigo. It's like a shiny blue color, very reflective, and it looks very nice, I gotta say. It's very cool. Although I will note that this is another area of cost cutting, because both the Moto G6, the Moto G5 actually, the Moto G5 had a metal back, and then the Moto G6 and the G7 both came with glass backs, but this phone has a plastic back. So it looks like it's glass, but this is actually a shiny, glossy plastic. So if you do get this phone, I would put a case on this thing. Now, as for me, I'm getting a case for this tomorrow. It's coming in the mail tomorrow. But yeah, get a case on this phone because this plastic back will scratch extremely easily. So just another little bit of cost cutting there. So again, just to note, this is not a glass back, it's a plastic back. So now let's go over the cameras. And as you can see, you have a lot of cameras here. This looks like it actually has 4 cameras on it. No. I think that, yeah, it's hard to say. I forget exactly how many cameras this phone has, but this here is your main 48 megapixel camera, and then you have an ultra wide camera, and then I believe this is your macro camera, and I believe these are just sensors. So I believe this phone has 3 cameras. It could have 4. Again, I'm not sure. I do know it has a standard camera, an ultra wide, and a macro. I'm not sure if this is an additional camera or if this is a sensor. It looks more like a sensor to me, but if I'm wrong with this, I will say so in the comments. But right here is your flash, and you do get a rear-mounted fingerprint sensor, which is pretty nice. And then coming over here, might be hard to see, but you got your buttons. Kind of clicky, not the clickiest in the world, but it feels fine. And then in terms of the phone itself, I'll go ahead and turn it on so you can see. As you can see, it's pretty bright. And you can see that most of the screen uses the body. So as you can see, the bezels are really on the small side, especially for a more budget phone. You got yourself the hole punch camera right there. And so again, it's not bad. Again, for a $200-300 phone, again, it's really not bad. The bezels, again, they're not as thin as a flagship phone, but it's not bad. It's really not bad. And at least from first impressions, this LCD does look really nice. So it's not an OLED, but this LCD does look very nice. We'll move the camera so you can get a close-up of the screen here. So yeah, as you can see, pretty thin bezels. You got your earpiece up there. Not bad. And it is a big phone. I'm going to have to get used to that. So, putting this next to my G7 Play, you can see how much bigger this phone is. Now, compared to the standard Moto G7, it's not that drastic. The G7 had a 6.2-inch display. This is 6.4, but I have the Play version of the G7, and that has a 5.7-inch display. But you can also see, though, that the old G7 Play, as you can see, it has a bit of a notch to it. And if you look at the standard G7, that has a teardrop notch, whereas with the new Moto G, they decided to get rid of the notch entirely and instead have a hole punch camera, which is fine with me. I very briefly tried out a Pixel 4a, and the camera didn't bother me, so honestly, I really don't mind. I don't mind a small notch. I don't mind a hole punch camera. So it really all comes down to your preference. One cool thing, though, about this phone is that this phone does have dual speakers. So you have a bottom firing speaker here, along with your charger and headphone jack. And then up top, your earpiece also doubles as a speaker. I am glad for this because with the Moto G7, that phone actually only had 1 speaker. Whereas the Moto G6 and the G5 and the G4 all had a front-firing speaker. The G7 got rid of that feature, but with the Moto G8, that returns. And not only do you have that front-firing speaker, but with the bottom-firing speaker, you essentially have a stereo pair. So, just to wrap it up, I'm going to set up this phone, use it, and I'll see whether, it's any good or not. But at least from first impressions and at least from how it is on paper, to me, this phone does look pretty good. It does. And so anyway, thank you for watching my unboxing video of the Moto G Stylus. Get another view of the back there. It does look really nice, I gotta say. And again, it's really not that heavy. It's not that heavy considering how big this phone is. So I think that this is going to be a pretty positive experience. But anyway, thank you for watching this video.